from here on out, this book is going to tell us how to live, how to find our higher power, what to do. When many hundreds of people are able to say, highlight the next 3 lines, that the consciousness of the presence of God is today the most important fact of their lives, they present a powerful reason why one should have faith, right? And again, I mean, that's hopefully your sponsor, that's the people that wrote the book, the authors of the stories, that's the guys, the people you see at meetings that have recovered and are now trying to help other people and live their life a new way, right? It's all these people. This world of ours has made more material progress in the last century than in all the millenniums which went before. Almost everyone knows the reason. Students of ancient history tell us that the intellect of men in those days was equal to the best of today. So the intellect is simply the capacity to learn. They were the same as we were. Yet we've got airplanes, toaster ovens, cars, we've got all these things, right, that they didn't have. Almost everyone knows the reason. Students of ancient history tell us that the intellect of men in those days was equal to the best of today. Yet in ancient times, material progress was painfully slow. The spirit of modern scientific inquiry, research, and invention was almost unknown. Okay, highlight. In the realm of the material, men's minds were fettered by superstition, tradition, and all sorts of fixed ideas. Okay, so, and they're going to use this to help us, because that's us, with this whole God idea. Some of the contemporaries of Columbus thought a round earth preposterous. Others came near putting Galileo to death for his astronomical heresies. So I'm going to tell you, 2 quick stories here. First story, and it's about belief and faith. Let's say that you move into this area right here, and you don't really know anybody, but your car breaks down, and you go across the street and you knock on the door and you ask your neighbor, "Hey, my car broke down. Do you know a good mechanic?" And the guy says, "Yeah, I know Jim down the street." You go to Jim. He'll treat you right. He'll do a good job and charge you a fair price. So you go to Jim. He fixes your car. He does a good job, treats you right, gives you a fair price. You leave there. A year later, your car breaks down again, right? Now, the first time you went to Jim on belief, the second time you're going to go back on faith, because you know that he's going to do a good job and he's going to treat you right, right? So the first time somebody told you that this would happen, you went on belief. The second time, because you have direct experience, you're going back on faith, right? So you can only start with belief, right? Came to believe, step 2. You only start with belief. It doesn't say, step 2 doesn't say came to know or came to have faith in. It only says came to believe, and you're basing this on what the people in the book are telling you, what your sponsor's telling you, what people at meetings are telling you, right? Now, Columbus. I'm Columbus, and I just love this. I'm stealing this directly from Joe and Charlie, right? Columbus is one of the greatest examples on what you can do with belief when you change your belief. So roughly 500 years ago, most of what is called the civilized world was situated around the Mediterranean and the western shores of Europe. Now, they found a place called the East Indies. And in the East Indies, they had these wonderful spices, these wonderful silk fabrics, this great pottery. They had all this cool stuff that the rich people wanted, right? So goods for the rich and the well-to-do. And they were looking for a new trade route to get to the East Indies. And somebody asked the question, well, can we sail to the East Indies? And they said, no, there's no way you can sail to the East Indies. What you do is you go to the northeast end of the Mediterranean Sea, then you go by horseback, you go there by camel, or you walk. And it takes a couple of years, And then somebody said, well, how about if we sailed there? And they said, no. If you try to sail there, you're going to go off the edge of the world and you're going to die, right? And people probably sailed out and they never came back. Now all of a sudden Columbus comes on the scene, right? Here comes Columbus, right? And Columbus probably had to be an alcoholic, right? Because he's going to believe differently and he's going to express that belief. Now, people who did that back then, many times were hung from a tree. They had their head cut off, right, if they believed differently. So Columbus says, I believe the world is round, right? And then Columbus made one of the most drunk statements ever. He said, I believe we can get east by sailing west, right? Other things that tell us Columbus was an alcoholic. When Columbus left, he did not know where he was going. When Columbus got there, he didn't know where he was. And when Columbus got back, he did not know where he had been, right? But what really makes Columbus an alcoholic is a woman financed the whole trip. And she did it twice, right? Twice. So this is a formula that the world has always known. This is an age-old formula, and this is the formula that we use to go through that urge to freedom. Okay, the first thing, you've got to be willing to do something. So for Columbus, the need to find a new trade route made him willing. Right? For me, I was broke. I was near death. I wanted to kill myself. I couldn't stop using. Right? That made me willing. Right? B, you've got to believe you can do so. Right? So, Columbus, he thought I can get east by sailing west, because he thought that world was round, right? Now, for me, I saw others who were as helpless as me, and they had recovered from this. So that's where and they told me that it would work. That's where I got my belief. Now, when we have the belief, when Columbus had the belief, he's still standing on the shore. Does him no good. So he's got to make a decision. Right? So for us, making that decision is step 3. For Columbus, I'm going to go and find out if the world is round and not flat. Right? Now this decision, when Columbus made it, he is still standing on the shore. When I take step 3 and I say, made a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand Him, I'm still not doing anything, right? So we've got to do D. And D is to start taking action, right? So for Columbus went to the king of Portugal asking for money. The king said, no way, you're going to sail off the edge of the world and I'm going to lose all my money. Then he went to the Queen of Spain. He said, look, we can do this. We can sail east. The world is round. The Queen gave him money. He bought ships. He bought provisions. He bought men, right? And then he took off. He left. He took action. So again, his belief and his decision did him no good until he took action. Now, once Columbus started sailing, we don't know this for sure, but a lot of people think that Columbus hired a special sailor. This special sailor had the best eyesight in the world, and he'd put him up there at night with a lantern on the lead ship, and Columbus said, look here, you, I believe the world is round, but if you see the edge of the world, you holler so we can get turned around so we don't go over it, right? So Columbus sailed straight west for several days, and Columbus got results. He found land, right? Now, he found the West Indies, not the East Indies. He came back, he went back to the Queen, and he said, look here, refinance me because I proved I can do it. This time I'm going to go back, and this time I'm going to get the silks, I'm going to get the spices, I'm going to get the pottery, the fish sauce, the linens, all of those, the wine, all of those things that you want. Now here's the key. The second time that Columbus left sailing west to get east, he did not have that special sailor on the front of the bow, because Columbus went back on faith, not on belief, because he knew that he wasn't going to sail off the edge of the world. He knew that he was going to get past the West Indies and hit the East Indies. So, step 2, guys, you cannot start with faith. Everybody thinks, I got to have faith. I can't have faith. You do not need faith. You can only start with belief. You start with belief. You make the decision, right? That's step 3. You take action, which is steps 4 through 11. And then I'm telling you, you are going to get the results, right? The obsession is going to be lifted from you to drink. Once you get the results, you're going to have faith. Right? So the first thing we need to recover from alcoholism is we've got to be willing to change. We've got to be willing. That's why we walk into these rooms. The second thing, we got to believe we can do it. The third thing, we got to make the decision to find out. The fourth thing is we take the action, which is steps 4 through 11. So again, step 3, guys. Step 3 does us no good until we do 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Step 12 says we had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. Step 2 doesn't say came to know. It doesn't say came to have faith in. It only says came to believe. Right? Now, me personally, I no longer believe that God's going to save my life, right? Get me back to sanity. I know He's going to do it because He did it. You should have seen me when I walked in here, man. He has totally turned my life around and granted me sanity and freedom from the obsession to use alcohol, drugs, and gamble. So we've got the faith. We go to the newcomer. We get the newcomer to believe that they can do it too. Then we get the newcomer to make the decision. And the decision can be as simple as I make a decision to do what you did. Then we take them by the hand. We walk them through the action steps, 4 through 11. They do the work. They get the results. They have the spiritual awakening, the spiritual experience, the personality transformation. Then they go to the newcomer. I've seen this. I've only been sober not even 5 years. I've got people that I've sponsored that are now taking other people through this. I mean, it just multiplies. It's an amazing thing to watch. The one thing that we cannot do, we cannot make the newcomer willing. We cannot do that. I mean, I wish I could inject, 500 cc's of willingness into everybody's ass, but I cannot do that. That's a job they got to do for themselves. And the only way people are going to get willing, right, is they're going to have to do what I did. They're going to have to go out there. They're going to have to drink a hell of a lot of whiskey. Maybe they're going to do a lot of cocaine. Maybe they're going to end up in jail. Maybe they're going to lose their job, divorce, and be completely hopeless. That's what it took for me. That's how they get their willingness, right? So people that say, I've been working step 1 in AA for the last couple of years and it's not doing me any good. That isn't true, man. We practice step 1 out there, man. We do it out there. We don't do it in here. And as far as if anybody tells you that you got to have more time before you sponsor people, do not listen to them. Ebby Thatcher went to Bill with 2 months sober. Bill went to Dr. Bob with 6 months. Dr. Bob went to Bill Dotson with a matter of days. So you go to people and you start helping them as soon as you feel any kind of change in yourself and as soon as you think you've got anything to offer. And I don't care if that's 3 days sober. Me, again, man, I was sober 6 months. I was ready to drink or put a bullet in my head and going to a meeting every night because I wasn't working these steps. And when I went through Code Blue, they assigned me a kid who was 25 years younger than me, 25 years, sober for maybe about the same time as me, but he was an older member because he had done the work and had the experience, and I had not, right? So, let's go back. Where did I leave off here? Columbus. Okay. Some of us, Columbus around earth preposterous. Others came near putting Galileo to death for his astronomical heresies. We asked ourselves this, are not some of us just as biased and unreasonable about the realm of the spirit as were the ancients about the realm of the material? So just an analogy to ourselves. Even in the present century, American newspapers were afraid to print an account of the Wright brothers' first successful flight at Kitty Hawk. Had not all efforts at flight failed before? Did not Professor Langley's flying machine go to the bottom of the Potomac River? Was it not true that the best mathematical minds had proved man could never fly? Right? I think you can write 12/8/1903, I believe, was when the Wright brothers flew. 12/8 of 1903, they proved everybody wrong, man, and they flew because they believed they could do it. They made a decision they were going to do it, and they took action to do it, same as Columbus. Did not Professor Langley's flying machine go to the bottom of the Potomac River? Was it not? Had not people said God had reserved this privilege to the birds? Only 30 years later, the conquest of the air was an almost old story, and airplane travel was in full swing. But in most fields, our generation has witnessed complete liberation of our thinking. Highlight that sentence. I mean, man, you look at the way things change from generation to generation. It's simply amazing. We look at things differently. Show any longshoreman a Sunday supplement describing a proposal to explore the moon by means of a rocket, and he will say, I bet they do it. Maybe not so long either. Is this amazing? Let's write July 20th, 1969. Landed on the moon. So that's 30 years after Bill wrote this book, or after the book was published. 30 years after it was published, we landed on the moon. I bet they do it. Maybe not so long either. So let's highlight to the end of the paragraph. Is not our age characterized by the ease with which we discard old ideas for new, by the complete readiness with which we throw away the theory or gadget which does not work for something new which does? That's even more true today. It's unbelievably true. Some people got to get a new phone every 3 months, right? So this next paragraph is rather important. We're going to read this. It's a little flashback. We had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply our human problems this same readiness to change our point of view. So we're going to highlight that whole paragraph, and then next to it we're going to write anti-promises. So go ahead and highlight the whole paragraph now, and off to the left write anti-promises. So these are the opposite of some promises we're going to get after we do the 5th step and the 9th step. Though this book is laced with promises. We get promises all over this book. Not only the ones that are read at meeting, they're all over this book. So we had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply our human problem, same readiness to change our point of view. Okay, put a 1 in front of we. We are going to list the bedevilments. That's the first one. We were having trouble with personal relationships. I know I was. Put a 2 in front of we. We couldn't control our emotional natures. I mean, the first 6 months I was sober, not working these steps, I couldn't control my anger. I thought I was going to get fired. Put a 3 in front of we. We were a prey to misery and depression. Put a 4 in front of the next we. We couldn't make a living. Put a 5 in front of the next we. We had a feeling of uselessness. Put a 6 in front of we. We were full of fear. Put a 7. We were unhappy. Put an 8. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. Was not a basic solution of these bedevilments more important than whether we should see newsreels of lunar flight? Of course it was. Okay? So right next to what we wrote, you wrote anti-promises. Now write another note. Ask sponsee, does he feel like this, he or she? Ask sponsee, do you feel like this? Are any of these things, can you relate to any of this? Ask sponsee, does he or she feel like this? And I had all of those bedevilments. The only one I was hanging on to was making a living, but at the end, even that baby was gone, right? Highlight the next 4 lines. When we saw others solve their problems by a simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe, we had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas did not work, but the God idea did. So after God idea did, write solution. Solution. That's the solution everybody talks about when you hear them get up and tell their story at the speaker meetings. Now, off to the left, let's write ourselves a note too. Spirit of hope message at meetings. That's what we want to give out. Spirit of hope message at meetings. That's our job, right? Once we get better, we don't want to go in there, oh yeah, when I drank and I did that. We want to give a spirit of hope message at meetings. Because somebody comes in, man, all these bedevilments, and they're feeling pretty doggone bad. I want them to walk out of that meeting saying, my God, that fella, he told me it could happen to me too. I want people to walk out of meetings feeling that they can get what we've got. And that's giving them a spirit of hope. The Wright brothers' almost childish face that they could build a machine which would fly was the mainspring of their accomplishment. Without that, nothing could have happened. Right? So, childlike, we can do this. Let's highlight the next sentence. We agnostics and atheists were sticking to the idea that self-sufficiency would solve our problems. Right? Again, I'm going to use my willpower I'm going to work more hours. I'm going to do yoga. I'm going to use my willpower because I can do anything, right? So at the bottom of the page, my sponsor had me write, my way of doing things kept me stuck. Now, if that's true for you, write it down. If it's not, you don't have to. But my way of doing things kept me stuck, and that was sticking to my old beliefs. That was not having an open mind, thinking I'm always right, scoffing and saying things won't work before I try them. I mean, that's how I live my life, right? My way of doing things kept me stuck. When others showed us that God's sufficiency worked with them, we began to feel like those who had insisted the Wright brothers would never fly. So at the top of the page, again, we're going to write something. Get away from this chair here. Right, and again, this is my sponsor. He really believes this. People need to go through the insanity of over and over and over. Right? And I mean, I've sponsored people, and you lend them some money, you go and get them, you help them get out of scrapes, you do all this. People need to go through the insanity of over and over and over. People need to go through the insanity of over and over and over. Right? I kept thinking this time it's going to be different. This time something else is going to happen, and it happened to me over and over and over and over. Same result whenever I drank or did things my way. Logic is great stuff. We liked it. We still like it. It is not by chance we were given the power to reason, to examine the evidence of our senses, and to draw conclusions. That is one of man's magnificent attributes. We agnostically inclined would not feel satisfied with a proposal which does not lend itself to reasonable approach and interpretation. Hence, we are at pains to tell why we think our present faith is reasonable, why we think it is more sane and logical to believe than not to believe, why we say our former thinking was soft and mushy when we threw up our hands in doubt and said we don't know. Highlight we don't know, and after it write agnostic. Agnostic. And I think most of us that come in here are agnostics. We're going to highlight the next paragraph. When we became alcoholics, crushed by a self-imposed crisis we could not postpone or evade, we had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else He is nothing. God either is or He isn't. What was our choice to be? Okay, so we got that highlighted. We're going to write something next to it. No halfways. Ask sponsee, what is your choice? What is your choice? Now, we're not taking step 3 right now. We're not doing that. We're just, are you even willing to believe, right? No halfways. Ask sponsee, what is your choice? Are you even willing to believe that there's something, right? Ask sponsee, what is your choice? Arrived at this point, we were squarely confronted with a question of faith. We couldn't duck the issue. Some of us had already walked far over the bridge of reason, underline that. Bridge of reason, right? Capitalize, right? A deity. Toward the desired shore of faith. The outlines and the promise of the new land, underline that. The new land, that's another deity for Bill, it's capitalized, had brought luster to tired eyes and fresh courage to flagging spirits. Underline, friendly hands had stretched out in welcome. Next to that, write meetings. When you see a newcomer, we got to greet them. We've got to greet newcomers. So just write meetings next to that. And I'll never forget, man, I went to this meeting, and I was really hurting, man. It was at the New Hope Alano, and after the meeting, like 15 people came up, and there was 40 people at the meeting. 15 people came up and shook my hand, and I'm sitting there thinking, how do these guys know that I'm fresh fish? What's going on here? Well, they know that I'm fresh because they go to that meeting every week, and they didn't recognize me. That's how they knew. I didn't understand that. It's like, why are they coming up to me? And that's what we do with the newcomer. We make them feel welcome. We were grateful that reason had brought us so far, but somehow we couldn't quite step ashore. Perhaps we had been leaning too heavily on reason that last mile, and we did not like to lose our support. So we see that both reasons are capitalized. So I wrote reason is God-given, right? We've got that. Reason is God-given. That was natural, But let us think a little more closely. Without knowing it, had we not been brought to where we stood by a kind of faith, hold tight here. We're going to, right next to to those sentences, right? Conduct yourself as if God is real. I don't care if you believe or not. We're going to try an experiment. When you write some things you'd like to be, conduct self as if God is real. Let's road test this. Even if you don't believe. What would you like God to be? Some orderly direction, some love, not getting drunk every night, whatever it is, and then conduct yourself as if God is real. Let's try an experiment. Oops. For did we not believe in our own reasoning? Did we not have confidence in our ability to think? What was that but a sort of faith? Yes, we had been faithful, abjectly faithful to the God of reason. So in one way or another, we discovered that faith had been involved all the time. We found too that we had been worshipers. What a state of mental gooseflesh that used to bring on. Highlight the next two lines. Had we not variously worshipped people, sentiment, things, money, and ourselves? Right? So, right next to that whole paragraph, we're going to write materialistic. Right? I worship money, property, prestige, sex, drugs, anything, right? Anything that would make me feel better temporarily. And then with a better motive, had we not worshipfully beheld the sunset, the sea, or a flower? Who of us had not loved something or somebody? How much did these feelings, these loves, these worships have to do with pure reason? Little or nothing, we saw at last. Were not these things the tissue out of which our lives were constructed? Did not these feelings, after all, determine the course of our existence? It was impossible to say we had no capacity for faith, or love, or worship. In one form or another, we had been living by faith and little else. Right? So next to that, let's write faith in God rather than materials. Faith in God rather than materials. And with this comes the love, right? And the people, our family. Imagine life without faith. Were nothing left but pure reason, it wouldn't be life. But we believed in life, of course we did. We could not prove life in the sense that you can prove a straight line is the shortest distance between 2 points, yet there it was. Could we still say the whole thing was nothing but a mass of electrons, created out of nothing, meaning nothing, whirling on to a destiny of nothingness? Of course we couldn't. The electrons themselves had more intelligence than that, at least so the chemist said. Hence we saw that reason isn't everything. Neither is reason, as most of us use it, entirely dependable. Though it emanate from our best minds, what about people who proved that man could never fly? That were the people that they proved that we couldn't fly. Certainly proved we couldn't go to the moon. Yet we had been seeing another kind of flight, a spiritual liberation from this world. People who rose above their problems. They said God made these things possible and we only smiled. We had seen spiritual release, but liked to tell ourselves it wasn't true. So let's highlight the next 3 lines here. Actually, we were fooling ourselves, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. So right above that, let's write instructions on where to find God. Instructions right above those 3 lines. You got a little space there. Instructions on where to find God. And let's also write what's keeping me alive. Instructions on where to find God. What's keeping me alive. Now, at the top, I guess at the top of the page, wherever you have room, we're going to write some things. We're going to write the little voice, the conscience, innate knowledge, common sense, the soul. All of those things are inside of us. The little voice, the conscience, innate knowledge, common sense, the soul. I bet a lot of you people, you're out there, you've been sober for a month, and it's like, God, you know what? I'm going to go out to that bar, I'm going to have a few, I'm going to dance. And there's that little voice deep down said, that doesn't sound like too good of an idea, because I know what happened the last time, but we didn't listen to that little voice and did it anyway. So the little voice, the conscience, innate knowledge, common sense, the soul, they're telling us that we're going to find God deep down in every man, woman, and child. Right? I mean, if that's the case, we've all got our own personal God that we can tap into. Right? Little voice, conscious, innate knowledge, common sense, the soul. It may be obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things, but in some form or another it is there. For a faith in a power greater than ourselves, the miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives are fact as old as man himself. You know, there are studies where they put these little toddlers, or I don't know exactly how old they were, but they put these little kids together, and they found out that these little kids, when given a choice, would actually give the other little kid more than they took for themselves. Right? Now you get a little bit older, 4 or 5 years older, and all of a sudden these same kids are now taking a little more for themselves and giving a little less. But when they get the kids out there, these studies are showing that they're going to give more to the other person. It's simply amazing. Right? That's inside of us. So let's write, off to the right, let's write, be an asset to society or a liability. Be an asset to society or a liability. I sure like trying to be an asset a lot better than the big old liability that I was. Be an asset to society or a liability. For faith in a power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives are facts as old as man himself. We finally saw that faith in some kind of God was a part of our makeup, just as much as the feeling we have for a friend. Sometimes we had to search fearlessly, but here he was there. He was as much a fact as we were. Highlight to the end of the paragraph. We found the great reality, notice that that's capitalized, deep down within us. In the last analysis, it is only there that he may be found. It was so with us. So next to those 3 little lines, let's write, prayer and meditation find him or her. I don't know who God is, but I got him down. Prayer and meditation find him or find her or find God, whatever. Prayer and meditation find him. We can only clear the ground a bit if our testimony helps sweep away prejudice, enables you to think honestly, encourages you to search diligently within yourself. Then, if you wish, you can join us on the broad highway, underline broad highway, capitalized again, another word for a deity. And then let's highlight the last 3 lines. With this attitude, you cannot fail. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you. Okay? So next to that, let's write seeking equals promises. So seeking equals promises. And I'm talking about those promises that they read at all the meetings. Right? The seeking equals promises. In this book, you will read the experience of a man who thought he was an atheist. Circle the word atheist and then draw a little line down to the bottom of the page and write Fitzmayo. Fitzmayo, Fitzmayo, Our Southern Friend. He wrote Our Southern Friend, and you can write 5th AA, I believe number 5, that's, and started Detroit. So a little bit of knowledge about him. So Fitzmayo, the 5th AA member, started Detroit, AA in Detroit. Our Southern Friend is the story he wrote. His story is so interesting that some of it should be told now. His change of heart was dramatic, convincing, and moving. So he had the spiritual experience. Again, most of us are going to get the slow, laborious wake-up. Our friend was a minister's son. He attended church school where he became rebellious at what he thought an overdose of religious education. For years thereafter, he was dogged by trouble, frustration. Business failure, insanity, fatal illness, suicide, these calamities in his immediate family embittered and depressed him. Post-war disillusionment, ever more serious alcoholism, impending mental and physical collapse brought him to the point of self-destruction. Next to that, do the little bracket and write bedevilments. These are his little mini bedevilments that we read about just a couple pages back. Bedevilments. One night when confined in a hospital, he was approached by an alcoholic, underline, who had known a spiritual experience. Underline just that little thing, who had known a spiritual experience. Next to it, write, had done the steps. Had done the steps. I'm speeding up because I got like just 3 minutes. I'm going to give you some instructions at the end of the meeting. Our friend's gorge rose as he bitterly cried out, "If there is a God, he certainly hasn't done anything for me." But later, alone in his room, he asked himself this question: is it possible that all the religious people I have known are wrong? While pondering the answer, he felt as though he lived in hell. Then, like a thunderbolt, a great thought came. It crowded out all else. Gotta highlight the italics. Who are you to say there is no God? Right? Who am I? This man recounts that he tumbled out of bed to his knees. In a few seconds, he was overwhelmed by a conviction of the presence of God. Underline presence of God, capitalized. It poured over and through him with the certainty and majesty of a great tide at flood. The barriers he had built through the years were swept away. He stood in the presence, highlight to the end of the paragraph, he stood in the presence of infinite power and love. He stepped from bridge to shore. For the first time, he lived in conscious companionship with his Creator. So after that, right, he found faith. Now, again, guys, that's the spiritual experience. Happened to Bill, happened to Fitzmayo. Not going to happen to most of us. Most of us, we're going to have the awakening, the educational variety. Thus was our friend's cornerstone, underline cornerstone, fixed in place. No later vicissitude. Vicissitude means loss of interest. No later vicissitude has shaken it. His alcoholic problem was taken away. The obsession was removed. That very night, years ago, it disappeared. Okay, so highlight this next sentence. Save for a few brief moments of temptation, the thought of drink is never returned. Of course, we're gonna have those few moments of temptation. That's gonna get us. And at such times, a great revulsion has risen up in him. Seemingly, he could not drink even if he would. Highlight, God had restored his sanity. Okay, so let's write mental obsession right off to the right of that top paragraph. Mental obsession, someday I can drink, is gone. That's sanity. Mental obsession, someday I can drink, is gone. That's sanity. Now, I'm not saying save for a few free moments of temptation. I'm not saying that the thought isn't going to cross our minds. It's going to happen. You're going to have using dreams. Using dreams are fine. You know, you wake up, you say, thank God, right? So mental obsession, someday I can drink, is gone. That's sanity. Remember, Bill thought about going into that bar here, the tingling of glasses, the soft music, the thick smoke, the gay chatter, and he thinks, I'm going to go in there. And all of a sudden it hit him, if I go in there, I'm done, right? What is this but a miracle of healing? Yet its elements are simple. Circumstances made him willing. Okay? Willing to believe, that's step 2. Circumstances made him willing to believe is step 2. Circumstances making him willing is step 1. So circumstances, step 1. Willing to believe, step 2. He humbly offered himself to his Maker, step 3. Step 3. Then he knew. Highlight the next paragraph. Even so has God restored us all to our right minds. To this man the revelation was sudden. Some of us grow into it more slowly. But he has come to all who have honestly sought him. Circle the word sought and write action. Action. Okay, we're going to write a few things. We're going to say the third step prayer will be done. But sought, write action next to that. When we drew near to him, he disclosed himself to us. So God could and would if he were sought. Just write that down. God could and would if he were sought. We read that in the ABC. Okay? And then let's write, don't deprive people of their bottom. Then get right with God. Don't deprive people of their bottom. Then get right with God. Must seek. Seeking is an action. Must seek. Seeking is an action. Don't deprive people of their bottom. Then get right with God. Must seek. Seeking is an action. Then let's write, mean what you say what you mean, and don't be mean. Those are good words. Mean what you say what you mean, and don't be mean. Okay, so just a couple of instructions I'm going to give you. Okay, so let's write, we're going to go 1, 2, 3. Reread page 567. Reread 567. Again, do the God is thing if you haven't done it.
Sorry, what page?
567, the spiritual experience. Do the God is, right? Write what you would like God to be. Just write a few things, doesn't have to be long. A couple of things you'd like God to be. And then write down how you relate to the anti-promises. Remember those 8 things we listed. Just go back to those and you don't even have to write it down, but just think of each one how you relate to them. And these are also things you're going to give to your sponsee. So I want you to have your sponsee do that too. So write some things you'd like God to be. Reread page 567. Write down how you relate to the bedevilments several pages back. And then real quick, guys.
You don't know what page it is?
567 is, the bedevilments are on page 52.
Oh.
Those are just the anti-promises that we just did. And then real quick, everybody, I want to grab one of these sheets on the way out and grab at least 2 of these. Make several copies of these, right? So we're jumping ahead, but we're not meeting next week, so I want you to get started on your 4 step. All I want you guys to do, read how the example did it, and I only want you to fill out the first 2 columns. So I want you to fill out people that you are mildly upset with or that you hate with a passion. So I am resentful at. It's going to be your husband, wife, girlfriend, boss, the cops. It's going to be, and I want you to go back through your whole life. People that you have some anger with, and just get started on it. You don't have to do the whole thing, but get started on that list. And don't look at any of these don't look at column 3. So just who are you angry with? And then if you have time, you can write down some of the causes, but just get started on that. I can read again, yep. Which things?
God's living, critical to your side,
Don't deprive people of their bottom, then get right with God. Must seek Him. Seeking is an action. Seeking is an action, yep. And you can look at my book here. But I think, guys, so again, on this 4-step stuff, just get started on it. I mean, when I first did this, I said, I'm not angry at anybody. Then they said, well, how about your boss, right? How about that girlfriend that cheated on? Oh, yeah, I'm angry at them. Oh, how about the IRS? Oh, yeah, I don't like them. How about, and then there's just was a ton of them. So just get started. Don't even look at column 3. Let's end with the 3rd step prayer. Page 63. God, I offer myself to Thee, to build with me and to do with me as Thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do Thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of Thy power, Thy love, and Thy way of life. May I do Thy will always. Peace. Everybody have a wonderful Memorial Day. We will see you 2 weeks from tonight.
Okay,